All right, welcome back. Today we are going to be going over chapter 7 in Animal Farm. And by now you should have read chapter 7 and you also should have completed the questions for chapter 7 in the Google Classroom. We are going to be covering some literary elements, some literary terms from chapter 7, focusing on mood and theme and foreshadowing. We're going to be going over the plot events from chapter 7. And like always, we're going to dig a little deeper into some of the concepts in chapter 7. So, first, your literary terms from chapter 7. I really wanted you to focus on the mood in this chapter. And the mood in a story is the feeling that the reader perceives, and the feeling is conveyed and it's intentional. It's through the author's words and phrases. So, in the beginning of the chapter, you should perceive the mood as being dreary and depressing. It's written that it was a bitter winter. The stormy weather was followed by sleet and snow, then by a hard frost that did not break till well into February. So this should stir up some feelings of gloom and depression and a little bit of hopelessness, some strife, some turmoil, which is certainly what is happening on the farm and in the story. The theme, again, theme is the universal message of a story, and our theme is consistent. It's the same, that education is important, and it's reflected virtually in every chapter. Just a quote I pulled for you to reflect the theme is when Squealer tells the animals, I could show you this in his own writing if you were able to read it. And there's certainly a danger in being uneducated that certainly plays out in this chapter. And last, foreshadowing is when there are hints and clues about what's going to happen in a story or in a chapter. In this one, this is conveyed when Squealer says, "That is the true spirit, comrade," cried Squealer. But it was noticed he cast a very ugly look at Boxer with his twinkling eyes. So this should stir some suspense. And it also foreshadows for us that things are on unstable ground, unstable footing for Boxer, and we need to be alarmed at his fate. What could potentially happen to him? There's some spotlight cast onto Boxer through what he does in this chapter, and we're we're concerned for him. We know something's going to happen, and that's foreshadowing. All right, so the events in chapter 7. It was a very, very eventful chapter, probably one of the most eventful chapters. We start off, it's another brutal winter. The animals are rebuilding the windmill, knowing that the world is watching them. And they are still under the impression that it was Snowball who knocked over the windmill, which I want you to know that is truly impossible for a pig to knock over a building. It can't happen. But the animals believe it because that's what's told to them. That's what they're told, why the windmill fell over. It is revealed in that same paragraph that the humans were saying the windmill fell over because its walls were 18 inches thick. And if you know anything about construction, you need a sturdy base in order to have some sort of building of any sort. So 18 inches is certainly not enough of a base to hold up a building, which is truly why the windmill fell over in the windstorm. So when they're rebuilding it, they're going to make the walls now 3 feet thick, which is definitely sturdier. So it was an oversight in the plans and a poor choice in building, but certainly Snowball had no effect whatsoever on the windmill falling over. In fact, Snowball is gone. He is not lurking around. He is not committing some of the hazards and the destruction on the farm, even though he keeps getting blamed for it. So winter slows the progress of the rebuilding of the windmill because the quarry where the stones are is blocked off by snowdrift. And I know you know full well how big snowdrifts can be, especially here in Ohio. So imagine trying to work and pull and move things through some of those larger snowdrifts. It's next to impossible. Some of them probably still exist right at this very moment, even towards the beginning of May, because they get so thick and heavy and frozen and refrozen. All of the animals now are cold and they're hungry. They're running out of food, and they're working harder and they're not getting enough sustenance. It's stated that only Boxer and Clover never lost heart. So they are the only two animals on the farm who are continuing to push forward and to continue with the agenda and fully believe in the future prospect and prosperity on the farm. Squealer is running around while the animals are working hard and rebuilding, and he is giving speeches about the joy of service and the dignity of labor. But the animals are certainly more inspired by Boxer's leading through example and him continuing to say that he's going to work harder. It's also interesting that Squealer, one of the pigs, is telling them they should be joyed with their service and proud of their hard work when he is not contributing any service or hard work. He's just standing and observing and talking at them. There's a food shortage officially come January. It's stated starvation seemed to stare them in the face, which is personification. It's personifying starvation. Napoleon has a plan, right? So there's no food. The food is certainly very limited, but there's rumors going around, especially among the humans, that look, the animals have run out of food. So Napoleon gets a lot of sand and he fills up all of the food bins to make them look full. So they're practically to the brim with sand, and then he spreads food stuff over the top. So he spreads grain on top of the sand or corn on top of the sand to give off the appearance that there is an abundance of food, that there is, in fact, no shortage of food. He wants things to appear to be going very well on the farm. In fact, he has Mr. Whymper come and see this fake supply of food himself. So Mr. Whymper will report to the other humans that, the food bins are full, that this is a lie, when we know that that is not the case. So he's just faking everybody out with this plan, giving the illusion of having an abundance of food when in fact there is not. They still need food though. So there's a plan. Napoleon is going to engage in trade with the neighboring farms to procure grain and food sources for the animals. Now, anytime Napoleon steps out of the farmhouse, he is flanked by fierce, growling, snarling dogs. The other animals are afraid of him because they've seen what could happen with the dogs, how they previously chased off Snowball, and Napoleon is now governing and leading through fear. All the information, because he no longer associates directly with the farm animals, all of his information and orders and directions are channeled through Squealer. A little further on in the chapter, the hens, the chickens, are told that they will be trading their eggs in order to get the grain. And remember, this is against what Old Major wanted in chapter 1. He wanted all of the animals to be able to raise their own children and live their long, full lives. And obviously, taking away eggs would be taking away future chicks and future children. So the chickens are very upset, the hens are very upset, a mini rebellion takes place. What the chickens do is all the eggs that they had laid, that they were about to hatch and brood, they smash them and they protest. And so Napoleon and the dogs cut off all the food supply to the chickens, starving them out of their protest. And after a healthy amount of days, some chickens were lost in the protest. They lost their lives. But another rumor spread, another lie is told by Napoleon that the chickens died of a chicken illness instead of through this protest and the effects of starving. Anytime something bad happens on the farm now, Snowball is blamed for it. Although I want to be clear that Snowball is not in any way, shape, or form involved in the happenings on the farm. He is now more like a phantom who has his little pig feet and everything, and he's blamed for everything, although some of these things are not physically possible. Napoleon has taken to sniffing around the farm to detect traces of Snowball. So, again, this is all a show, it's an act. He's making this up. He'll sniff around a room or a corner of the farm and say, "Oh, yes, Snowball was here." Again, this is all a lie. He just needs an enemy to make himself seem more important. It's now being said crazier things that Snowball was a spy for Farmer Jones, that Snowball actually fought against the animals in the Battle of the Cowshed, that Napoleon had a moment of glory in this battle, and it was Napoleon who ran fiercely head on at Jones and bit him in the leg and cried death to humanity. None of that happened. Okay, none of it happened. And Squealer is saying, "Oh yeah, all of this is written down in some secret documents that we found. I would happily share them with you, but none of you could read." Again, the danger of being uneducated, the importance of education. So, through all this, especially the retelling, the revisionist history account of the Battle of the Cowshed, Napoleon, he perpetuates that lie. Boxer knows in his heart that this is not the way things were, and Boxer questions it out loud to Squealer. And we know the dangers that are involved in going against Napoleon and questioning Napoleon. So Boxer, in he's completely honest and he's correct, yet he still questions this account out loud. Through some convincing by Squealer, Boxer is satisfied and agrees that, well, if Napoleon says it, it must be right. But Squealer, our foreshadowing, he gives Boxer a look that should give us chills because we know that Boxer is going to be targeted now. So a few days later, Napoleon orders a meeting in the yard, which he hasn't had meetings for a very long time. The animals gather to hear him speak. It says that they all cowered silently in their place, seeming to know in advance that some terrible thing was about to happen. Napoleon gives a shriek, and all of a sudden, those dogs, Jessie and Bluebell's puppies, who are now full grown, they race out, growling and snarling, and they grab 4 pigs by their ears and drag them up front. And they also come at Boxer. But Boxer sees it and he holds up one of his big hoofs and he manages to keep the dogs off of him. Eventually, the dogs are called off of Boxer. And so they're all watching now as the executions begin. And I want you to remember that it is stated in the unalterable 7 commandments for Animal Farm that no animal shall kill any other animal. And here we are with Napoleon carrying out executions of fellow animals. So, some of those who perish in these executions in front of all the others, this horrific scene, the 4 pigs who protest when Napoleon abolished Sunday meetings, the 3 hens who led the egg rebellion and told Napoleon that Snowball had visited them in a dream and encouraged them to do this. There's a goose who confessed to sneaking some kernels of corn. There was a sheep who confessed to peeing in the drinking pond, and 2 other sheep who confessed to chasing a ram and murdering him. So it said all were slain on the spot. And so the tale of confessions and executions went on until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet. And the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown since the expulsion of Jones. And after watching all this, after the executions are over, Boxer is mulling it over, and his response to seeing all this is stating simply that the fault must lie somewhere in themselves and that he is going to work even harder now. The animals realize that this is not the life that they were promised. Clover and some of the other animals are out in the pasture reflecting. Clover especially knows this is not how things are supposed to be. This is not the life that they were promised. This is not what they've worked so hard for at all. And the only reason that they're not going to speak up or do something is because clearly it's safer to be on Napoleon's good side. So to comfort themselves, they begin singing Beasts of England, their song of the rebellion, equivalent to their national anthem. It brings them peace and comfort and inspiration. When all of a sudden Squealer shows up, flanked by a few dogs, and he tells them to stop singing, that the song is forbidden. He says the rebellion's over. They are forbidden from singing Beasts of England. It served its purpose, and now there's a new song, a very short new song. The new song is Animal Farm, never through me shalt thou come to harm. But they did. Through Napoleon on Animal Farm, harm has come to the fellow animals. So this is deeply ironic that their new song is about keeping them safe and protected and taken care of while their fellow animals are being slaughtered, executed for going against Napoleon, for questioning Napoleon, for even a whisper of a rumor that they were in cahoot with Snowball. So some of your questions in chapter 7, we're going to answer them. The first question that I pulled, how is the new windmill built differently? Again, the first windmill was not sturdy enough. The walls were only 18 inches. So the new windmill requires a lot more effort, a lot more stone from the quarry, and the new windmill will have walls that are 3 feet thick. So it will certainly be more sturdy. Why does Squealer say Beasts of England has been outlawed? Squealer claims that Beasts of England is a revolutionary song that is no longer needed since the revolution is complete. This is all part of the overall plan to brainwash the animals into forgetting how Animal Farm was supposed to be, into forgetting that they were supposed to be equal and safe and prospering and working hard for themselves. And instead, this is part of Napoleon's complete and total takeover. So by outlawing the song and forcing upon them a new song, it's another tool of Napoleon's for total control and how he corrupts his power. The third question, if they knew it was going to be a brutal winter and their crops would take a hit, why didn't they prepare everything before all of this happened? And part of the reason for this is, at least the reason that we could pull from this chapter, is that they were working more on the windmill and less time was taken away from the harvest. But they still have way more food than they are receiving. Um, I don't want to reveal too much about the future chapters, but there's still not so desperate a shortage of food. They could all still be fed and well, but something is happening to the food supply. So if you want to start hypothesizing what that might be, go ahead. And your fourth question, why did Napoleon start to kill the animals? Um, he didn't want anyone to question his authority, to question him, to question his power. So he would lash out with violence and he would shame the animals, whatever he could do to make them fear him and to keep them in line. All right. So great questions like always. Keep up the hard work. You're doing a great job. We're going to dig a little deeper now, just a little deeper into some of the overarching ideas in chapter 7, some of the bigger concepts. I want to go back again to the concept of revisionist history. When there's a spin on an account of history, it's biased, it is inaccurate. So it's a history of lies. And this revisionist history from this chapter would be the story of Snowball working with Farmer Jones and working against the animals in the rebellion, and him being a traitor to the cause of Animal Farm. We know that is not historically how it happened. We know because we read what really happened, that in fact the only reason that the Battle of the Cowshed was a victory was because of Snowball's participation. But now a different version is being told and put out there by Napoleon and Squealer and enforced by the dogs. We also touch on the concept of gaslighting once more, which is when people are manipulated, or animals in this case are manipulated mentally by questioning and telling them over and over and over that something that they know full well happened did not happen. And so they're being told now that it was Napoleon who bit Jones and who cheered death to humanity. And they're being questioned. You don't remember this? Surely you remember this. Well, first of all, never happened. And second of all, they're being forced to doubt their truth, what they know, what they experienced. And that mental manipulation is gaslighting. And again, our theme, the importance of education. The animals cannot read, they cannot verify, they are being controlled because they don't have the tools to justify, to prove, um, to defend themselves. They can't read these documents, they can't see if they exist. And because they're uneducated, they're easier to control. They're so believing, they're so trusting. We have a very, very few who can read and who will, play a bigger role as things get a little more dire and desperate. But the reason that they're so easily controlled and manipulated is because they lack education. So education is so very important for all of us, for all these animals, for all of us. All right, so let's go over some of the chapters, the questions from chapter 7. I'll pull that up for you. Chapter 7, any second now. All right, so we have one of these 3-level study guides, sort of in the beginning. Question number 1, all I need you to do is to read the statements and to tell me whether they're true or false. So the first statement, the windmill fell down because the walls were 1.5 feet thick. That's 18 inches. Is this true or is this false? I mean, really, is that the reason it fell down? The true reason. The second statement, the animals are dying of starvation. Is that true or false? The third statement, the animals are fighting among themselves. The fourth statement, the animals are resorting to cannibalism. And the fifth statement, the animals are committing infanticide. Are those statements true or are they false? Question number 2, we have a passage to read and then some questions to answer about it. The passage is, the potatoes had become soft and discolored, and only a few were edible. For days at a time, the animals had nothing to eat but chaff and mangles. Starvation seemed to stare them in the face. And your question is, what figurative language is present in that passage? Number 3, you're being asked to analyze, why does Napoleon order the food bins to be filled nearly to the brim with sand and then covered up with what remained of the grain in the meal? What was his purpose or intent for doing that? Number 4, think back. When the chickens are told that they must surrender their eggs, what is their response? What do they do in response to being told that? Number 5, you are being asked to identify some, 3, of the things that Snowball is blamed for in this chapter. So 3 of the things that happen that the blame is just put on Snowball. And number 6, you actually have a longer passage to read. You're going to read the whole thing and answer the questions below. It says, I do not believe that, he said. Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed. I saw him myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards? That was our mistake, comrade, for we know now, it is all written down in the secret documents that we have found, that in reality he was trying to lure us to our doom. But he was wounded, said Boxer. We all saw him running with blood. That was part of the arrangement, cried Squealer. Jones' shot only grazed him. I could show you this in his own writing if you were able to read it. The plot was for Snowball, at the critical moment, to give the signal for flight and to leave the field to the enemy. And he very nearly succeeded. I will even say, comrades, he would have succeeded if it had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. Do you not remember how, just at the moment when Jones and his men had got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, that it was just at that moment when panic was spreading and all seemed lost that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward with a cry of death to humanity and sank his teeth in Jones's leg? Surely you remember that, comrades, exclaimed Squealer, frisking from side to side. So your 2 questions for this. How does this passage connect to the importance of education? How does this passage demonstrate gaslighting? And I guess there's 3 questions here. How does this passage demonstrate revisionist history? So, I kind of talked about this a few minutes ago if you want to rewind and get that information again. Number 7, what happened when Napoleon had all of the animals assembled for a meeting in the yard? Number 8, what was Boxer's reaction to that assembly? Afterwards, after they had parted from the meeting, what was Boxer's decision going forward? What was he going to do? Number 8, what is the reason that the animals are no longer allowed to sing Beasts of England? For this one, I need a direct quote and a citation. And lastly, number 10, what is ironic about the new song lyrics? Animal Farm, never through me shalt thou come to harm. All right, so those are your questions. Remember that you still have all these assignments in the Google Classroom to be working on. Also, make sure if you have any missing assignments that you get those in so I can get them graded. I do want to remind you live in this video the importance of clicking the button in the Google Classroom to submit your assignment or to turn it in. Because if you don't click that button, but you've worked on something, I will never see that it's done. So you really need to make sure you're clicking that button and making sure your work is in. So that's it for today. And we just have one last video tomorrow. You're going to read chapter 8. We're going to go over it. And that's it. Feel free to get a hold of me, email, or message me in here, or click the link in the banner for a video chat if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. And that's it. So, bye.